2020 글로벌 코리아 박람회 컨퍼런스
We're having the Global Korea Convention 2020, and the session on urban development and eco-smart city will begin shortly. In compliance with government measures to respond to COVID-19, I'd like to ask you to wear your masks and also keep them on during the session. You can watch the session on the Global Korea Convention 2020 website as well as the YouTube channel, so please stick to the given time.
Good
morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are having the session on city development and eco-smart city. I am Lee Sang-gu from the Korea Research Institute for Human Settlements. I will be the MC of the session. Before we begin the presentations and the discussion, let me invite President Kang Hyun-soo of the Institute for his opening speech. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. We're having the third day of Global Korea Convention 2020. As one of the sessions, we are dealing with urban development and eco-smart city. And as the host of the session, I would like to say a few words as the president of KRIS. I would like to thank Chairperson Sung Kyung-nyung of NRC, and I would like to thank him in advance for giving us a welcoming remark. We are going to have a 100-minute session. K-Water, LH, and Chris will be delivering presentations. And we have President Im Chun-taek of Korea Institute of Energy Technology Evaluation and Planning will give a presentation in person. We have from the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transport, Mr. Jung Chae-gil, Professor Pan Young-won of Chungbok University, Director Park Kwang-gi of New Paradigm Future Institute, and CEO of Biocore, Shin Yong-gyu. They will be the discussants. I would like to thank them in advance. Recently, we are targeting 2050. The Korean nation is aiming to become a carbon neutral nation, and Green New Deal policies and Digital New Deal policies will be implemented as the post-COVID-19 national agenda. I'm sure you've watched the news on the TV. The president of Korea declared that Korea will become a zero carbon society. And so there will be insightful presentations about how we can succeed in the Green New Deal policies using urban development and eco-smart city initiatives. And Busan Eco Delta project has been selected as one of the national projects, and it is one of the representatives' water-friendly projects. And new cities and new town development have been targeting developing nations, and now they're targeting the advanced nations to spread the K-quarantine and other measures necessary in the cities. And LH has been implementing urban development projects, and they're going to share their cases of going overseas to develop industrial cities. And Chairperson Sung Kyung-nyung of where he is heading NRC. NRC is engaged in many projects. Public institutions and research institutions are implementing mega projects about urban development and smart city. They will be used to overcome the technical limitations. They will be focusing on sustainable eco-smart cities, and the research results will come up soon. We look forward to the good presentations and the discussions, and we will soon have the Korean-made eco-smart cities that will lead the world. I hope that we will have a very constructive session. We are living in a challenging time because of the pandemic. I would like to thank all the online and offline participants for your interest. We hope that the relevant projects in Korea can find a market overseas. Thank you very much.
That was the opening remarks by President Kang Hyun-soo of KRIS. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite Chairperson Sung Kyung-ryung of NRC, who will deliver his congratulatory message. Please welcome him with a big hand.
네, 반갑습니다, 여러분.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to meet you. We're hosting the Global Korea Convention 2020. There are 19 sessions in total, but I believe that this session is indeed the most important when we think about how to prepare for the future.
저는 제 고향이 경남
I am from Gyeongnam Province,
원래 제 고향은
city of Jinju,
진양군
but
진성면
I am from Cheongguk-ri in Jinyangmyeon, which is in the middle between Jinju and Masan, about 20 kilometers from Cheonju towards Masan.
제가 겨울이 되면은
I remember when I was young,
어릴
in
때
the winter season,
생각이 납니다.
I had a lot of memories.
시골에서 태어나고 자란 분들은
If you grew up in a rural village, you may relate to this.
항상 날이
And in the winter, it was very cold.
시골집이라는 게
And when you think about these houses in a rural village,
이제 방풍하고
they don't have a lot of
그런
insulation systems in place. So there is a very thin walls and thin windows. So there was cold air coming in, and it was hard to have my face out because it was so cold, and I had to cover my face as well when I was sleeping. And there was a big temperature difference between the floor and the ceiling. And there was always this cold air coming in from the outside. I remember my hands were frozen and there were frostbites.
제가 그때마다 왜 집을 이렇게 밖에 짓지
At that time, I was wondering why they built houses like this.
중에 하나가 초등학교 다닐 때 이제
When I was in
모를
elementary
심으러
school,
모를 심는
there would be
뭐라 그래 이러다가
these sowing season for rice production, and I would be in charge of holding this line that would indicate where the seeds had to be sowed.
졸고 이렇게 하는데
And sometimes it was quite boring and I would doze off, but on the other hand, this other person would pull out the string and I would fall into the water. And at that time, I was thinking, why would rice paddies not in a rectangular shape? And that was the kind of question that I had in my mind when I was young. But later, as I got older, I was able to see that the rice paddies became more organized. But still, many houses in the rural communities, even today, are quite fragile and they are not well insulated. We're talking about smart cities and human settlements. When we think about the quality of life, housing is very critical. I don't think our housing situations are that different from 50 or 60 years ago. And this is rather common sense, but about 10 years ago, I became aware as I was studying it that if you could design your house for energy efficiency, you could have a lot of benefit. So since then, I've been preaching this message that we have to apply the passive house and active house principles in designing houses. All these houses and buildings and apartments have to be designed and constructed according to some energy principles. Otherwise, we won't be able to address climate crisis. And energy efficient design for housing is also critical for industry development. If you could create a city like that, and if you could construct housing like that, then we will be able to enhance energy efficiency. This could be a very good model for other countries. So I've been asking President Kang Hyun-soo of KRIS for joint research so that we can develop an ideal model for housing so that these principles can be applied for new housing development and also new city development. And also for old houses, we need to revise them and change them so that they can become more energy efficient. And this way we can save energy. So for the past 1 year, we have had many research projects, and now we're seeing some research findings. And LH and K-Water were all joining hands together.
오늘 이 자리에는 또
Here in the session,
주택이나 도시의
we
전문가는
not
아니지만
only have experts for housing and water resources, but also we have people from the fields that have implications for urban development. For instance, CEO Park Kwang-gi of New Paradigm Future Institute has been applying these important principles for industrial design and industrial complex development. There are many industrial parks that were built long time ago, and they have to be updated. And when we export industrial park models for other countries, then we would have to apply these new principles. And that has been the proposal by Mr. Park. And now LH is building an industrial park in Myanmar. And President Im Chun-taek is arguing that we can apply this model in the Rust Belt in the US as well. And also we have CEO Shin Yong-gyu and is providing consulting. And his idea is that we have Koreatowns in many countries, and we can integrate these design approaches in these Koreatowns all over the world. I am quite confident that in the future, housing and building and construction and urban development, they will become the key industries, and they can become a very big industry. And it also means that we need to apply green technology and digital technology in developing our cities. And then we can maximize efficiency and also convenience for our citizens. And I believe that all cities around the world have to change in that direction. They need to be renewed in that direction. I believe that there will be a large amount of investments in redeveloping our cities. Otherwise, we won't be able to respond to the climate crisis. Industries have to change, and automobiles have to change, and all the instruments and tools that we use have to change as well. But I believe that cities have to change to respond to climate change. There are many new towns being built, but when you think about ecology and energy efficiency, unfortunately, some of the new towns are being built under the inferior principles, but we have to apply superior principles in urban development. I'd like to add one more comment. Korea is pursuing Green New Deal, and in the US, with President-elect Biden, they are focusing on clean energy, and in Europe, they have declared Green New Deal already, and since 2013, China is emphasizing ecological civilization, but they're all disconnected, and there's a lack of integration of these initiatives at the global level. No proposal has been made because there's competition between the US and China.
이건 이제 그 국정 아젠다로 내걸고
And they now have this national agenda on the US, but we may have been late compared to these countries, but I think Korea can play a role of a bridge between these countries and coordinating these initiatives.
미국과 협력할 의사를 보임으로써
We can show our willingness to cooperate with the US more actively so that we can elevate the level of Korea-US alliance, and we can also join hands with the US in promoting global initiatives. And this could be a very desirable outcome, and this will lead to better inter-Korean relations and better relations in Northeast Asia as well. So we can utilize Green New Deal in promoting global peace, and there are many initiatives and tasks that we can perform. And if there are good ideas proposed, we can execute them. For instance, if we can redevelop the Rust Belt in the US, I believe we can do so.
인류가 지금까지 개발한 어떤 도시보다
There have been many cities, but we are proposing the most desirable model of cities where people can enjoy their lives in a clean and safe and energy efficient environment. A couple of months ago, I met with Professor Lee Myung-ju of Myeongju University, and we went to the Zero Energy Industrial Park in Nohon District. I thought at that time that I wish I could live in this kind of house. There was constant air circulation, and it is very energy efficient. I hope that we can build such houses as quickly as possible, and if we can turn our cities into more eco-friendly cities, it will be very nice. And I'd like to ask for the support from LH and Chris and many other institutions. I hope that you will discuss these new urban models and we can execute them, implement them so that we can increase the quality of our cities, and we can also help promote better relations between the US and China, and we can promote peace on the Korean Peninsula. I believe that all of these principles are incorporated in our initiatives, and I'd like to ask for your understanding, support. Thank you.
네, 성경용 경제인문사회
Thank you very much, Chairman Song Kyung-nyung of NRC. Thank you for your insightful comments. And now we will begin the presentations under the topic of urban development and eco-smart city. As you have browsed through the program to minimize the participants, I am wearing two hats. I am speaker as well as the MC, and the panel discussion will be moderated by President Kang Hyun-soo of KRIS. We have Mr. Lee Jun-gun of K-Water, who is going to talk about development measures for water-friendly smart city. Please welcome him with a big hand. Good morning. I am from K-Water. My name is Lee Jun-gun. K-Water has visions for a water-friendly smart water city, and I'd like to thank the hosts for giving us this opportunity. This is the order of my talk. I'm going to introduce to you briefly K-Water and the new urban issues after post-COVID-19 and eco-smart city and the current and future status of eco-smart city and K-Water's new vision. And before I begin the main part of my presentation, I'd like to talk about history a bit. The Yellow River is one of the origins of world civilizations, but every summer it suffers from floods and there are great damages. According to the history of China, about 2000 BC, Yu the Great was able to become a king because he was able to manage and control the flood on the Yellow River, and he succeeded the Emperor Shun. And thus came the Chinese character to control. As you can see, one of the components of this character has the water component in it. So if you're able to control and manage the water, that is good governance, and that is used as part of the word for politics and ruling and managing. And K-Water is the only public institution who is a water professional company. And people are wondering why K-Water is interested in urban development. Isn't this a water company? Looking back on 53 years of K-Water, even though we are a water specialized company, we have done businesses close to urban issues. In 1967, we were founded as the Korea Water Resources Corporation. We built Soyanggang, Andong, and Daecheong dams. And in order to participate in the industrial development, we were reorganized as Industrial Sites Development Corporation, and industrial sites were developed in Gumi, Yeosu, Changwon, and we became K-Water only recently in 1988. The name was Korea Water Resources Corporation back then. We were the first institution, public institution, to manage water and built hinterland cities and many industrial complexes, including Changwon, Onsan, Ansan, Daedeok, and Sihwa. And of the industrial complexes that K-Water created, 51% of the national production and 54% of the exports come from these complexes. And there is a higher need for the waterfront space from the people, and we're developing the waterfront areas. And so to meet the demands of the people, we are creating new value for water, and we are continuing to work hard to improve the quality of life. Moving on to the next section about climate change and new urban issues after the post-COVID-19 era. The climate change is taking a toll on all the countries around the world. Many of the CEOs in the global companies see environmental and climate change risk as one of the biggest risks. And because of the climate change, many water disasters are taking place, and it knows no boundary. Worldwide, we have repeated droughts and floods, and Korea is no exception. For many years, there were the periods of droughts in the western part of Chungnam, and there were unexpected torrential rains and storms. And this year, we had the longest monsoon season lasting 54 days, and there were heavy rains causing a lot of damage. In this age of climate change, green conversion is the best policy. Until now, we have been facing with many risks, but this one is unprecedented yet. We have to have green conversion, especially in the water sector. And along with green conversion, the new paradigm for cities is shifting. We have environmental degradation, and on top of the urban cities, we need to build sustainable eco-smart cities, and that's the new paradigm for the urban problems. People and nature will coexist, and high value adds will be created and will enhance the quality of life, and this will be a solution to new urban issues. And to meet these challenges, in celebrating our foundation, we have proclaimed the management of state of emergency in climate change for the first time as a public institution. And Eco Smart City initiative has been formed, and I'd like to touch upon that. We will connect the gray and green infrastructure within the city to improve the citizens' quality of life. Nature and people will coexist in the rivers, and people will be able to drink from the tap without worries. And there will be carbon neutral water management, digital water management, and water circulation. And these are some of the aims that K-Water is pursuing. We have three components: eco, smart, and city, and I'd like to explain them one by one. We will introduce a clean energy, and we will have environmentally friendly cities, and by using ICT we will have convenience, and we will have the smart city accordingly. And with the healthy water circulation, we'll be able to have the cities safe from the water disasters and have resilience. And we want to provide solutions to the new urban issues. To go into details, through the renewable energy, we will be able to establish eco-cities, and we will use renewable energy such as solar, hydrothermal, wind, and green hydrogen. Transportation, safety, security, these will be based on ICT, IoT, smart technologies, and there will be a control center, and a smart city will thus be born. The cities will be safe from the water disasters, and there will be low impact development, and green infrastructure will be in place to restore the quality of water, and there will be reuse of water to solve the water shortage issue. And we will have the resilient city where water circulation is restored. And K-Water type eco-smart city will look something like this. There will be smart city prevalent, and advanced cities will be in place. We will have eco-filtering, disaster prevention systems so that resilient cities can be built, and hydrothermal and solar power will be used to build a carbon neutral city and develop a standard for eco-smart city. Eco-smart cities are actually built by K-Water, and I'd like to show you some examples. There will be advanced water management technologies, and there will be convergence with new urban technologies. There will be flood control using new technologies and secure more waterfront areas. And there will be restored water circulation, and there will be intelligent water management. One flagship model is Busan Eco Delta City, which was designated as a pilot city. Busan Eco Delta City, from the very design stage, was designed as an eco-friendly waterfront city. There are three streams running across the city, and potentials of water will be maximized. We will create a global brand and improve the quality of life of the citizens. And this is going to be a landmark water-friendly city that will be known globally. K-Water has 50 years of water management technology and know-how, and it will be showcased in the city. There will be greening of the city, and there will be reuse of water, including rainwater and wastewater, so that the paradigm of water circulation can change. And Busan EDC will symbolize Korea's advanced water technology. First, we will have monitoring systems so that there will be a prediction of heavy rains, Radar technology will be implemented, and water infrastructure monitoring and analytics systems will be built in the control center. And throughout the city, there is impact on the water circulation because of urbanization. We will have many eco-friendly technologies to have low-impact development cities. And near the streams and rivers, there will be eco-filtering so that the quality of water will be enhanced greatly. And for the first time in Korea, there will be small-scale vertical purification facilities. Municipal water will be provided so that the citizens will be able to enjoy clean water free from pollution, which used to be the case because the water traveled great distances. To go into great detail, we have now the centralized water supply system. There are large-scale purification facilities far away, and the water pipes had to carry the water a great distances. But during the process, there were leakages and some accidents and potential pollution. And according to the characteristics of large-scale supply, there could be some residents who had to suffer from water outage. In Incheon and Pohang, there were accidents and there were water pollution incidences where people had to suffer greatly from the inconvenience. And now we are going to have distributed water supply system where the water purification facilities will be close by to the residents. Busan Eco Delta City is the first city to adopt this system so that Yangpyeong, Inje, Yeongdong, Kimje, they will benefit from these systems as well. From water source to tap, ICT will be applied to have smart water management. Will constantly monitor the quantity and quality of water. And as for the groundwater treatment facilities, we will be adding smart functions so that the municipal water can be reused for watering the plants and to clean the streets in the city and be used as a waterway for transportation modes. And hydrothermal energy could be used for heating and cooling to save the energy cost of the residents. By the year-end next year, we will have 56 units in a smart village. We will be applying the new technologies in this smart village. For 5 years, this will be a living lab, and the residents can apply and sign up. There are 54 units, and based on the technology, we will be able to have a standard platform, and we will spread this nationwide to solve water problems. And through the smart city, what are K-Water's new visions? In the Sihung and Hwasong area, K-Water is building the Songsan new city, and we're applying the new water technologies. Like the technologies applied in Busan Eco Delta City, not only the water technologies, but the tidal waves, the wind power plants, and hydrothermal energy will be used as a standard energy to be used in this new smart eco city. And not only in the country, we want to disseminate the results globally, and we are working hard for global agenda setting. We have signed an MOU with IWRA and AWC. We will develop a global certification system and launch this. K-Water will lead the smart water management standard and contribute to cleaner water worldwide. KCT network is being implemented by the Land Ministry. We are working with Kyrgyzstan, Indonesia, and Vietnam. We're participating actively in the overseas projects to spread the smart water management technology. Once again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to present. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for the presentation by K-Water. It was Executive Vice President Lee Jun-gun. Thank you very much. Let's now move on to the second presentation, which will be delivered by President Im Chun-taek of the Korea Institute of Energy Technology Evaluation and Planning. Please welcome him with a big hand.
예, 한국형 산업도시 해외 수출 방안에 대해서
Good morning. I'm going to give a presentation on the export of Korean-style industrial cities. As Chairperson Song Kyung-yung mentioned,
뉴딜, 디지털 뉴딜,
there is this Korean New Deal, Digital New Deal, and Green New Deal. So my presentation is related to that. And also, it is also about the two books written by Park Kwang-ki, who is the head of the New Paradigm Future Institute. In these two books, they make proposals about how we can utilize the old manufacturing facilities and our human resources. There are not only small and medium-sized companies in other regions, but also large companies. You may think that large companies are doing well, but they do experience limitations. So we need a fundamental shift in our paradigm in order to help these companies. So these are the two backgrounds behind my presentation. And in addressing these challenges, we have come up with this expert model of Korean-style industrial cities. So that has been the background where we got the inspiration.
저희가 이걸 준비를 작년
We began to prepare for this since mid last year.
마침 또 바이든이 최근에
And then recently there was the US presidential election and candidate Joe Biden was elected. As Mr. Song Kyung-ryung mentioned, this is going to bring a good opportunity for Korean Green New Deal.
정부 차원에서는
At the government, they are actively promoting Korean New Deals.
이렇게 생각을 하고 추진하는 그런
And it seems that they are viewed as new deals for the domestic economy. That is true in some sense, because we need to create more jobs and we need to revitalize the Korean economy as we're going through the pandemic. So that is maybe the reasons why. But we should not limit our new deals there, because the Korean economy is dependent on exports. And if we invest a lot of government money on these new deals, we should not just target the domestic market, but we need to promote export in relations to these new deals, because the Korean economy is very much export driven. So we need to take a look at the globalization of Korean industries and how we can increase export. We can utilize the Green New Deal and Digital New Deal as an opportunity to reinvigorate our export. In that sense, I added my subtitle as the election of Biden and potential for Korea-US industrial alliance. So I'm going to discuss the necessity for industrial cities overseas and how we can collaborate with the US. First of all, I want to say that domestic industries are struggling. There is competition between the US and China, and the Korean manufacturing sector is struggling as there's protectionism all over the world. And the key industries such as semiconductor and automobile, so there are five key industries in Korea, but their competitiveness is declining. We are number one, of course, in terms of semiconductor, but we are competing with Chinese companies. And such competition will continue to intensify. And China and India are catching up really rapidly. So we need to find a way to make a breakthrough. If we continue to do as business usual, then it's going to be very difficult. And as you can see on the slide, the rate of utilization of industrial park has been declining, and this declining trend has continued even before the pandemic. And this is not necessarily related to the new deals, but for the past 20 years, the utilization rate of industrial parks has been declining, and the manufacturing competitiveness of Korean industries has been declining as well. So do we need to continue on in this trend? That's not sustainable. So we need to find an answer to counter this trend. There's another issue of job creation. This is something that the government wants to address. But if we do not change our industrial structures, this is not easy to solve, especially youth unemployment. And about 1 million baby boomers are retiring. But they retire at the ages of 50s and 60s, but they are quite healthy, so they can continue to work in their 70s. In Germany, they rely on industry, manufacturing industry, but in Korea, these people who retire are not given opportunities to learn digital skills. But if they get retrained to gain digital skills, they can continue to work into their 70s. So it's not just about creating jobs for young people, but it's also about increasing competitiveness of our industries. And this is also about increasing the skill level of Korean people so that they can contribute to economic development. In that sense, we should broaden our perspective. Rather than focusing just on the domestic economy, we have to broaden our perspective and think about what we can do overseas. And that is one way we can design a better future. Let's take a look at the existing solutions. In Korea, we used to expand manufacturing facilities with the support from the government. And just like many other countries around the world, there have been incentives provided for companies to come back to Korea, but the return rate is not very high. There are many companies going abroad, but there aren't many companies coming back to Korea. So they may go to China first, and then they reposition themselves in Southeast Asia, but there is not a lot of reshoring. But there's not much we can do about it. We cannot force them to return because there are commercial reasons why they are going overseas. So we cannot forcefully make them come back to Korea. Even though we have incentive systems, these have not been very successful. So we have to find a different way. First of all, as I got this inspiration from Mr. Park Kwang-gi's book, we revised what he proposed. We first have to change the purpose of overseas expansion. In the past, companies would go to other countries for low labor costs, but that should not be the reason anymore, because it is basically a form of exploitation. We have to be more inclusive in our business models, and when we expand to other countries, our initiatives have to be inclusive, because Korea is not just a small country, it is an influential country. China has a large population, and India also has a large population. We cannot compete with them in terms of labor or population. So we have to have an export model that is inclusive. It means that our models will help create and foster industries in their local countries. And you may think that we're struggling as well domestically. How can we do that? But that's not the right approach, because when you think about our industrial structures, we do have a very wide range of industries. Germany, Japan, and Korea have such a wide range of industries. Even China and the US have limited scope of industrial activities, but in Korea, we do have a very large amount of industrial activities. So if we tap into this, then we can create a very competitive export model. We can target least developed countries and developing countries. We can create sister cities where we promote mutual prosperity and co-development.
이제는 우리가
And we should
엔지니어링이라는
move away from simple manufacturing to engineering,
이런 식으로
consulting,
하이엔드,
financing,
로우-엔드,
and
하이엔드
R&D. So we have to make that transition from low-end to high-end activities.
국내의 그 제한된 인력,
And at the
그다음
same time,
제한된
we
공간,
have
제한된
limited
금융
spaces
자산
and limited
가지고
human
그쪽에만
resources
해서는
and
안
limited
되겠다.
financial
하이엔드
resources.
쪽으로
So we should no
전환해놔야
longer
그렇게
just
하려면은
stay with
필연적으로
low-end
우리가 가지고
activities,
있던
but we have to
로우엔드
move towards
분야를 해외로
high-end
이전해야 됩니다.
activities. And to
그렇게
do
하고
so,
우리는
we need to
하이엔드로
move
바꿔나가는
low-end
그런
activities
과감한
to
산업
other
전환을
countries
우리가
while we
이루어내야
focus on
되는
high-end
거죠.
activities in Korea.
그리고요. 이제 세 번째는 일자리
And number
부분인데
3, it is about
이걸
job
자꾸
creation.
국내에서만 만들려고 한다거나 혹은 해외
People
유출을
tend to
방지하는
think that we
쪽으로
need to create jobs in Korea, or we
유출
need to
방지
stop
산업, 이제
the
첨단
outflow
인력
of
유출
human
방지하는
resources
그렇게 해왔는데
to overseas countries. But we have to actually be out there in other countries, in other overseas markets, and create jobs for Korean people who can work in other countries. And this is the kind of approach we need to take so that our high-end and high-skilled human resources can get jobs in overseas countries.
우리나라 인력들이 국내와 해외에 그렇게 있게 그렇게
So that we have
특히 이제
pools of
중요한 게
talent or human resources both in Korea and in other countries. And we can pair up youth and retired people together so that young people can find jobs and retired people can continue to work. I believe that Korea has the capabilities and has the right condition to do so, but so far policies were not in place to support this. And in the past, we just maintained the old paradigm. But the old paradigm has many limitations, and we have to overcome them. So that is why I am making these proposals. In other words, in short, I am proposing that we create a global industrial alliance, both with developed and developing countries.
그래서 이와 같은 배경을 갖고
So with that as a background, I'd like to give you some details about how we can promote industrial cities around the world.
20년 정도 이제 놓고 봤을 때
When we think about the 20-year horizon, we can create 30 industrial cities.
단지를 얘기를 한 건데요.
Mr. Park proposed industrial parks, and I think there is a lot of similarity. LH and K-Water, these corporations are doing well overseas. Likewise, we can create industrial parks and industrial complexes.
하자는 거죠. 그래서 해외 산업 단지에다가
Here in the industrial parks, there will be many different parts of infrastructure. K-Water will talk about water resources infrastructure, but there is electricity and telecommunications and medicine and road. So there are all these components of infrastructure that will be laid out.
그리고 또 하나는 이제 여기에
In addition,
한국의 숙련 노동
there will be highly skilled workers from Korea to be dispatched to these industrial cities, and their families would have to move there. So we need educational facilities, international schools, and we also need medical facilities, hospitals for these family members. And then there should be some culture. We can create a culture center for Korean Wave. So this will also benefit the local residents, and this will also be good entertainment for Korean people working there. And the silver industry will grow rapidly. If we have 30 industrial cities, we will select areas that are close in proximity to tourist attractions and destinations. And then if you travel to these countries, you can find Koreatown, and there will be accommodations and services that cater to Korean people. And this will benefit the local community and local economy, and this will also benefit Korean companies and people who are operating in other countries. So you can see this combination of infrastructure and services and industrial activities, and these baby boomers can go overseas and enjoy the silver industry services. There are many different forms of in cities, but we're targeting industrial cities. So that we can broaden the horizon of Korea. We are quite small in terms of land mass, but we can expand our economic territory by forming industrial alliance with countries around the world. And number 3, I want to talk about the cooperation model. Here,
중대협력은 뭐냐면
There
중소기업과 대기업
should
간의
be
그
cooperation
힘
between
분배를
large
그 이미
companies and
나이장도
middle-sized companies.
벤처 쪽에 배분돼도 불구하고 대기업의
Large
마케팅
companies
브랜딩
have
그
the
다음에
brand power and they
벤처의
have the marketing
창의력
capabilities, and
이걸
then
결합을 해서
venture
가야
and
된다
startup
이렇게 얘기를
companies
했거든요.
have
저는 굉장히 그걸
creativity.
공감을 하고
And that's
같은
what
얘기를
Mr.
사실
Park
박광기
proposed.
소장님도 해주셨어요. 그래서 대기업이 이제 앵커 기업 역할을 하고
So
대기업
large companies will serve as
상대가 지금
anchors.
베트남의
For
삼성전자가
instance,
성공했듯이
Samsung Electronics is
대기업 하나
successful
가면은
in
거기에 이제
Vietnam.
수백에서 수천
So there
개의
is this
협력사들이
large
같이
company
가거든요.
going overseas,
근데
and there will be
협력사들 개별
hundreds
진출하게
of
되면 너무 힘들어요. 그래서
suppliers who
앵커 기업이
can
가고
go
그리고
along
정부가
because these smaller
보조를
companies
해주고
cannot
그리고 이제 공사들이
develop market themselves. They will go there in tandem with the large companies. So this can be a good cooperation model between large and smaller companies. And then, of course, we will include local companies. We need to foster and develop local companies as well in the heavy industries and other chemical industries and many industries. We have to nurture local companies in these industries. And then these countries will be able to grow their economy as well. This is indeed a model for joint development.
그래서 크게 이제 한국하고 상대국하고
So here on one hand we have Korea and the other hand is a partner
국내는
country.
이제 본사나 연구개발
In Korea, we can have headquarters and research centers and key manufacturing centers. Of course, you need to have capabilities for manufacturing. So we will have the basic manufacturing capacity. And then in overseas countries, there will be more of an assembly and mass production. And these will later evolve into higher level activities such as R&D. We should not consider this as competition. But the more you share, the more you give, the more you will innovate yourselves because you are giving away a portion of yourself.
6대 제국의 비밀인데 혁신과 포용이 어떤
Innovation
나라에서
and
일어나냐
inclusion
보게 되면요.
is the key.
결핍이 많은 나라.
And
내가 뭔가
inclusion
부족한
and
게
innovation
많은
happens
나라.
in
그다음에
countries
위기가
where
닥친
there
나라.
are
그
deficiencies
나라가
or where there is emergency. When there's urgency, there will be innovation and inclusion. If you're hungry and if you're poor, then this will be a driving force behind development, behind innovation. So when you look at the human history, that has been the case. So if you continue to feel hunger and poverty, then you will be motivated to work harder and create wealth. In Korea, there may be some additional fat or additional parts that you don't necessarily need. Then we have to shed these parts and give them to overseas countries, and then we can become more innovative. This is a way of regenerating our industries, as I mentioned before.
그럼 어떤 형태로 해서
Then what will be the specific model for industrial cities?
그건 1960년대부터 현재까지 우리나라
Since 1960, starting from light industry to heavy and chemical industry to advanced industries, there have been these developments and we can apply them in other countries depending on their level of development. For instance, in the US,
주로 이제 저희가 예로 드는 저개발 국가가 아니죠.
the US is an advanced economy, but with the US, there is a lot of room for cooperation. Of course, we will have to apply different models of cooperation compared to developing countries. But the US has a large pool of manufacturing skills, and they do have manufacturing capacity. What can we do to help the US? The US has lost competitiveness in some areas such as battery, semiconductor, and so on. So we cannot do everything, but there isn't much market. And the R&D and technology, we have the competitiveness, but in the US, they are good at basic research. So even within R&D, we can divide and conquer. And I'm going to talk about the American model later on in more detail. So depending on levels of development of these countries, we can apply different models. We can find a good partner country. We cannot leave them to do it, and we cannot ask large companies to do so. There should be close coordination and cooperation between the government and the private sector. As I said before, It's not just exploiting their cheap labor, but it is about sharing our industrialization experiences. It's not only just about creating industrial parks, but also we need to build trust and promote and contribute to the economic development of these countries.
이게 이제 선진국형으로 갔을 때는
Now moving on to more of a model for advanced countries, such as the US. The US has competitive manufacturing industry. In 2016, China was number one, but in 2017, the US is number one in terms of manufacturing competitiveness in a comprehensive way. But of course, if you look at different industries, in many areas, Korea is falling behind the US, but in some industries we are better than the US. And if these industries are needed for the US, then we can collaborate.
이런 걸 잘 할 수 있는 국내 현재 컨트롤
So here we need a control tower for this kind of initiative. And then it could be mullet, or it could be multi,
하나 하려도 청을 하나 만들었지 않습니까?
or it could be the Ministry of SMEs and Startups. So we need some sort of an agency, government agency, that can serve as a control tower that oversees the entire process. And I think we have to go for pan-government initiative. There may be 2 key ministries and other related government agencies, and they all need to join forces together.
자꾸 너무 국내에 있는 기능을 어떻게 잘하는
Many government agencies are focused more on the domestic affairs.
경제와 산업,
But when you think about industry, the economy, and culture, we have to become more global.
지금 우리 한국한테 그걸
Currently, the entire world is paying attention to Korea, and they have high expectations, and we need to meet these expectations.
각 국간에 직접 정부가
So the government can play a role. It's of course not only the central government, but also local governments. When I meet with heads of 17 regional governments in Korea, I would often make this request. This is also included in Mr. Park's
우리나라
book.
대통령이나 장관하고 국회의원만 만나려 하지 말라요.
Local government leaders,
만나야 될 사람들은 누구냐면
they need to go out and meet with
장관,
prime ministers, ministers, and heads of local municipalities of developing countries,
협력 모델을
so that they can discuss how to cooperate.
그다음에 이제 다자 협력도 우리가 이제
In addition, we need to utilize multilateral frameworks because we want to build a global inclusive country, and we can further expand this to a global inclusive alliance. And industrial alliance can be the basis for such a vision. Next, we need financing. There should be money put into regenerating the industries and create jobs. In the past, we lacked financial resources and we had human resources, but now it's reversed. Now we have a lot of financial resources, but we lack talent. You may wonder if that's true, but it is just a mismatch problem. There are 2 million jobs that have not been filled, and 2 million people are seeking jobs, so there is a mismatch problem. But we still need to be supplied with more human resources that are highly skilled. So we need financing, and to do so, first of all, we can create an institution like World Inclusive Development Bank. Japan and the US created the Asia Development Bank, and China has also created an international bank. And Korea is an important pillar of the triangular cooperation, but Korea was not very good in terms of financing. So we can talk with World Bank, and we have signed an MOU, and we are examining various models and ideas. So this is something that we can propose, a World Inclusive Development Bank. And if we have an agency in charge of industrial city development, next what we need to do is to create a development bank that is inclusive. And then there's this educational aspect. When we create industrial cities overseas, then we need some vocational training and
그다음에
education.
창업 도시 내
And
국내
then
여러 대학들이
we
굉장히
also
충돌을
can
나갑니다.
have
국내 뭐 인력이 없다,
overseas campuses of
대학이
domestic
사고를
universities.
든다. 그런데 그거
There are some
국내만
concerns
와서
about
해외
universities
한국
struggling
와달라고
due
하는
to
데가
the decline in the
굉장히
number of
많은데
students,
이게
but
이런 걸 해줄
they
필요가
can
있고.
go overseas and expand their campuses.
미리 양성하는
Also, we can nurture people who can be dispatched to industrial cities.
그다음에 이제 현지에
And at the same time, there are human resources and laborers in the local communities, and they need to be trained and educated as well. So we can offer training and education for these local residents. Moving on to our idea for industrial city development in the US. This is an opportunity because we have the Green New Deal. And as Chairman Song Kyung mentioned, in the past we focused on economy, politics, and diplomacy in the Korea-US alliance, but we can expand that to the industrial cooperation. President-elect Biden is going to invest a large amount of money, and $2 trillion will be invested for the first 2 years, both public and private investment. So EVs and batteries and renewables, they will grow rapidly, and then there will be a decline of combustion engine industry and the traditional energy industries. So there are a lot of potentials and opportunities. What can we do? There are two ideas. First of all, we can tap into the Rust Belt. For instance, there are old manufacturing facilities for automobile production in Detroit, and we can turn that into EV production facility. And also in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, we can turn it into a wind power industry. Now, these products may not just be imported to the US, but they want to be able to produce them domestically. So there is a lot of incentive, and Korea is in a better position than China to be able to do so, because these are the kinds of industries that the US wants as well. Now, the second idea is creating entrepreneur-based cities. In Korea, there are many challenges in terms of changing laws and regulations to facilitate startups. But in the US, there are many favorable conditions for startups in the US. So we can promote entrepreneurship in the US, especially in the East Coast and the West Coast. There are startups centers and hubs. And in LA, there's the Koreatown, and we can facilitate and promote startup activities in these areas. So when the US changes, we can also change our domestic system. This is going to be the conclusion. In the future, we need to develop Korean-type industrial cities in other countries. Then we can create about 2.8% of the GDP of value added, and we can create 30 Koreatowns in other countries. And we already had some experience in the past. In smaller scale, there are places where Koreans live together in 180 countries, and we can utilize that, and we can select some of the candidate cities. We do have prior experience, and we have core competencies, and this is a must, because we have many limitations domestically. So by considering all these aspects, I hope that we will push forward with this idea. Of course, there are many obstacles and challenges and some concerns. For instance, people are concerned that there will be the emptying of domestic industries, but that's not true, because there will be dual presence. In Korea, we can become more high value-added activities, and then we can have other industries in other countries. And then there was the concern about the global value chain disruption. And if we have industrial activities overseas, then these may lead to issues when there is a disruption in the global value chain. But with digital innovation, there will be a lot of exchanges taking place virtually. And China and Japan are already doing so. Is there any room for Korea to do so? There may be some conflict, but I think that there are different areas where each of these countries is competitive. So we have to look at the areas where we are competitive. Thank you for your attention.
네, 감사드립니다. 저희가 지금 시간이
Thank you very much.
많이 지금
We are in a bit of a delay. We have to speed up, and please keep your time limit. I'd like to invite Mr. Lee Yong-sam from LH. He's going to talk about measures to go overseas and smart city development examples. Please welcome him with a big hand.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 LH
Hello, I am from LH Global Cooperation Project. My name is Lee Yong-sam. The two previous speakers have given us insightful presentations, and I was touched. And so the smart city development of K-Water has a lot of overlaps with us, Busan's Eco Delta City and the Sejong City. They are the national pilot cities for the smart cities.
전반적인 내용 저도 박광기 소장님 책도
I
두 번 정도
read
읽어봤습니다. 굉장히 훌륭하신
President Park's book twice,
원장님께서도
and
훌륭하신 말씀하셨는데
I am very much moved by the remarks made thus far. LH is in 35 projects in 19 countries, and I think the theoretical background was laid out. I am engaged in the global cooperation business. I became in charge of that only this year. I want to emphasize this. What I felt having taken on this project was there was this lack of control tower. In doing overseas development projects, the efforts are fragmented and the ODAs are fragmented amongst the KOICA, KIND, Exim Bank. And so there are siloed efforts. You just give ODAs and it's over. It's just a one-time effort. Nothing is consistent. And there is no follow-up measure. There was no connection made afterwards. In the beginning of this year, the headquarters for Global Overseas Development Project was formed, and that's the approach that we're taking thus far. And I would like to share with you our best practice in Myanmar, and we will look at the Kuwait smart city model. What we emphasize most is the business structure has to be in place and there has to be this implementation capability. You have to succeed in the overseas projects so that more Korean companies can win the bids and contracts. And this should be a continuous cycle. But it's not happening. We need to have a business structure in place and we have to have the risk management schemes. And I think that was what we achieved this year. In 35 projects for the first time, the KMIC in Myanmar has been completed. The president of Korea, along with the land minister, visited Myanmar and attended the ceremony. And industrial cities will be exported further. We will finalize the model so that more Korean companies can go overseas. It will be a form of JV for the large companies, and the small and medium-sized companies will also be able to go overseas, and LH will become the coordinator. I'd like to play a brief video for about 2 minutes.
네, 요 장을 제가 이제 두 가지로 이제 설명드려보겠습니다.
Let me
LH는 이제 글로벌 사업의 두 축이
explain this
있습니다. 첫 번째는
slide from two
동반
directions.
성장입니다. 동반 성장은
LH
해당
is
협력국과
after
같이
shared
동반
growth.
성장해서
We
포용성과
want the
높여주고
partner
포용
companies to
국가로
grow
진행하는 건데
so that we can
예를
have
들어서
more
동반 성장 예를 들면
transparency.
미얀마를
One
유사를
example
들었는데
would be the
해당 국가하고
KMIC
합작
in
투자를 합니다.
Myanmar.
그래서
There will be
전체 지금
co-investment and
1,300억
joint
정도
venture
사업인데
made,
그중에
130 billion
미얀마
won,
정부가 40%, LH
and
40%고
40% is
국내 기업도
invested
같이 가야
by
돼요. 국내 기업
Myanmar
글로벌
and
셰어가 20% 이렇게
60%
자본 출자를 해서
of
현지 법인을
from
만듭니다. 현지
Korea.
법인을
And so a
만들어서
local
그
entity
법인을
will
이제
be set up,
성공시키고
and that
예제와
local corporation
영속화시키면서 거기에
will
이제
succeed. It
뭔가
will
확장성을 갖고
become
끝없이
an ongoing business, and
심어주는 거죠. 그러니까
we
이게
will
동반 성장 그 과정에서
let
기술
that
이전, 개발
expand, and there
경험도
will be
공유해주고 기술
technology
이전하면서
transfer and knowledge sharing.
중국에서는 사실 수익 추경원에서
In
중국을 굉장히 싫어합니다. 지금 미얀마하고 베트남이.
Myanmar
이유는
and Vietnam are not on friendly relations with China because China is only seeking profits. China is not interested in shared growth.
두 번째는 이제 동반 진출입니다.
And the
동반
other
진출이 왜
aspect
중요하냐면
is
우리 공기업으로서
entering
동반
global
진출에 따라서
markets together.
예를 들면은 이제
For example,
대기업의 경우에는
if
저희들하고
it's a
같이
large
자본
company,
합작 투자를 합니다.
we can
그래가지고 지금
invest
합작
capital
투자가 예를
together.
들어가지고 베트남에
If,
지금
and in Vietnam,
박장선에 무슨 스마트 시티를 지금 38만 평짜리 대우하고 같이
uh,
MOU
Daewoo and we have signed an MOU for building a smart city in an area in Vietnam. And for SMEs,
어차피 이제 일부 합작 투자를 하겠지만
it will be a partial JV. But since we have the capital,
입주를 시켜주면서
we will
단순히
fill up
개발하기가 너무 어렵기 때문에
the
원스톱
offices,
이게 무슨 냐면은
and then we will also provide the one-stop services. The factory is built and production follows, and sales, distribution. This is very difficult for an independent or a small company to do that. And so with just one call, LH will be provided, will provide the one-stop services. Kotra, LH, and Exim Bank, and Credit Guarantee Bank, and 9 Korean institutions have formed a One Team Korea. And so when a Korean company wants to go overseas, then it has the backing of One Team Korea, and it can have a successful business. So this is going abroad together. And this is explained in this slide, and there are 5 platforms. And this is the model that I explained earlier. We have One Team Korea. It works with the companies in the private sector, and there is knowledge sharing and technology transfer to the recipient country. And there will be an internalization process. And we continue to talk with the overseas markets. So the know-how is very important, but we have a high level of trust. We have gained trust, and we also have the capital. Compared to China and Japan, the countries have more faith and trust in us. So that's what we focused on, trust building. And what is most important in overseas business development is to reduce risk. We have a checklist of 106 items, and we minimize risks. Before beginning the project overseas, there are 7 phases that we go through. 4 phases internally and through the land ministry and to the finance industry. We check off the risks in the checklist. And since we've had a lot of failures in the past, LH wants to prevent these failures, and We want to have more success
이
stories.
부분이 아까 지금 원장님께서 설명을 하셨습니다.
This was mentioned by the
단계별로
president.
저희들이 그거를 심어주려고 하는 거예요. LH가
This is what we are aiming for.
동안 압축
For
성장했는데
50 years, Korea has gone through a compact growth.
지금
The GDP per capita is now has increased 100-fold to $32,000. And the Southeast Asian countries learn from this curve and how we achieve this economic growth.
미얀마만 하는 예를 들어 미얀마가 1인당 국민소득이 지금 1,300달러입니다.
Myanmar's income per capita is $1,300, and this is the level of income Korea had in 1973. I was about 6th grade in elementary school, and when I go to Myanmar, I'm reminded of my childhood.
미얀마는
When we go to Myanmar,
잘 나오면
they're happy and they call it a smart city if they have the water system in place.
3,200만 평을 지금 검토하고 있는데 어떻게 할
And
거냐 그러면
how will we build the smart city? We will move in phases. We will first build the basic infrastructure. 35 projects in 19 countries.
현재 지금 산업단지 합체가 완료된 게
We have,
지금 현재 앞에 1단계, 2단계, 3단계 추진 단계에 있는데
so
구조가
the
완료된 게
projects are either in phases 1 or
6개가
1,
완료됐습니다.
2,
지금
3,
따라오고 있고요.
and some
요걸
have
설명을
reached
잠깐 해보겠습니다.
the
요 부분이
middle
이제 저희들이
phase.
스마트 시티를 그러면 국가별로 옵티마이징을 해야
We
되는데
need to optimize the smart cities per country. Some countries are just satisfied with having tap water in Myanmar, but in Kuwait, we have smart transportation, security, infrastructure, lifestyle, housing. We have 30 smart city solutions in 6 areas. We have a total of 100 smart city solutions, basic infrastructure plus ICT plus eco and green eco city. And for Myanmar, the basic infrastructure includes water and electricity, and even that, it suffices as a smart city. And for Kuwait, we have introduced more smart city solutions. And we have classified the 35 countries into these 4 quadrants. And we are trying to fine-tune the classification. This is our arbitrary classification, and we need to go into details. Because of the limited time, I will have to skip over a lot of pages. And this is how we plan for the projects. I know I don't have much time. I'll just talk about Kuwait. Okay, let me explain this slide. The Korean SMEs and large companies are going abroad to work with the Kuwait partners. The Kuwaiti government has invested $43.3 billion, and the total project cost is 26 trillion won, and the Korean companies are trying to get the contracts, and there are 30 smart city solutions adopted, and a total of 30 smart city solution providers will be winning the bid. I know I don't have much time. And we have the committee In Kuwait, to help the companies go abroad together, there are 8
20개, 7개, 3개 더 늘어났습니다.
subcommittees, and there is the recreation subcommittee.
국내 중소기업하고 소공급에
Korean SMEs and large companies and relevant institutions have formed the One Team Korea, and they're in the initial design stage of the Abdullah city in Kuwait.
시간이 그래가지고 죄송합니다.
I am very sorry, I don't have much time. I will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
예. 오늘 이 세션이 워낙 중요한 세션이고
This
또
is a very
핵심적인
important
창의적인
session, and
아이디어를
we have many
많이
wonderful and creative ideas. So we are running behind the schedule. I'd like to ask for your understanding. We were about to finish the session by 12:50, but I would like to extend the session to 1:10 p.m.
오늘 그 국토연구원을 대표하고 또 에코스마트시티 개념 정립
We have
추진
with
방안에
us
대해서 최대한 빨리
the next presentation, which is going to be about Eco-Smart City
지금
initiative.
경인사연에서 그 국내에
At the NRC, there are many agencies, especially 10 public agencies and research institutions on smart city, and this is going to continue until June next year. ESC, Eco-Smart City Initiative, is the name of the project, and we are announcing this or disclosing the details about this for the first time here in the session. As you may know, more than 5 billion people will have to live in just 3% of the land mass, and we have to deal with how to overcome the urban challenges. As you may know, Korea has many strengths, but then at the same time, Korea is not doing well in terms of environment protection, and there has been some criticism on that. How can we overcome this? Where are we positioned in terms of smartness and ecological footprint? While we were having meetings, upon the proposal by Chairperson Song Kyung-ryun, we decided to map out all these major cities. As you can see here, Seoul is great in terms of smart city, but we're also number 1 in terms of carbon footprint. You can see a concentration of many European cities. They are not only smart, but also they have very low carbon footprints. But as for Seoul, we have a smart city model and we have a lot of smartness, but at the same time, we emit a lot of carbon. So this is what we need to address. We are now at the critical juncture. Here, we are at a tipping point whether we can make our cities more resilient or we will suffer even more in the future. We need to create our cities to be more circular. As you know, there are UN SDGs, and goal number 11 is sustainable cities and communities. So this is a direction that we need to go in developing our cities. So the objective is 6 C-free city to 6 S-full city. That's the notion that we're promoting. I'm going to talk about some of the details. There is a jury since 2000. With the approval rate of 75% of the city citizens, they are promoting 2,000-watt city. It means that per person energy consumption, or currently they are spending about 6,000 watts, but they want to reduce that by 1/3. Currently, our society is 8,000-watt society. Can we achieve this kind of target? This is a big question for us. As you can see here, there are 7 milestones for green construction, and they are enforcing this. Since 2014, they are reaping benefits, and they were able to reduce carbon emission, and they reduce energy consumption while increasing the portion of renewables. And it is not just based on technology, but thanks to voluntary participation of citizens and change in their mindset. Of course, just because having one city doing this doesn't mean that we can reverse the trend in the climate change. But this can be a global model city, and likewise, so jury promoted this as because they wanted to be a global role model. Then, as you can see in these graphs, since 2014, they were able to see the actual benefit. In 5 different sectors, there are many policies that are put in place. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip some of the details. And then they have the CO2 reduction benefit, and they also calculated the benefits for society and economy in order to understand which policies and which technology solutions were most effective, and they ranked them, and they have the stage 1 and stage 2 targets for 2030 and 2050, and we were able to learn about this case in our study. And in Korea, as you can see, Professor Pan Young-woon from Chungbuk University and many other experts have been dedicated to building smart eco-city in Korea. And also, at the Comprehensive Greenhouse Gas Emission Monitoring Center, they have come up with a plan and methodology to achieve carbon reduction targets. And as we were doing preparation for Busan Eco Delta City, we developed the KPIs. And as was mentioned before, Professor Lee Myung-ju and others have been working to discuss production and manufacturing and management and maintenance, how we can create zero energy buildings. What are the criteria? So we have already done all the necessary research, and we do have tools that we can utilize to achieve this goal. Now, what kind of eco-smart city are we going to build? Ultimately, we want to ensure that our citizens are happy and our cities are sustainable. And people talk about this all the time, but how is the question? There are many different views of how we can implement this, and there's some absence of concrete ideas. So by conducting research, we came up with various conditions. We need to get rid of 6 C's. That's the first step. The 6 C's are CO2, casualty, contagion, congestion, crime, and complaint. The first 3 are about sustainable environment. So we need to create a sustainable environment, and by reducing these 3 C's. And the second 3 C's are about sustainable community. ECO, the first letter is eco, sustainable environment, and sustainable community. And 60, so we have the eco, 6C0. So that's the value that we want to achieve in the eco-smart city. So we're going to check whether we are satisfying these conditions as we're building and designing and building these eco-smart cities. Currently, 10 organizations have come up with 20 specific projects, whether we are going to target a city level or a district level or a building level, whether we are going to build a platform. And also, we are developing various KPIs so that we can remove 6 C's and introduce 6 S's. So we conducted research on these correlations or correlations of these factors, and we are going to present a model of eco-smart city. And based on this proposal, various organizations will come under the single governance and the monitoring system and the legal foundation. So there will be cross-sectional analysis, and the objectives and targets will be identified. And currently, the 10 participating organizations are doing cross-sectional, doing sectoral approach and cross-cutting approach. And so they're conducting research based on their expertise. We have governance and platform that are cross-cutting approaches. In the end, we want to have a systematic organization of the KPIs. We will have the key KPIs. In other words, we offer sustainable environment by reducing carbon emissions. We need to achieve net zero by 2050, but it will not happen overnight. We need to have a roadmap to get there. And in order to understand that, we need to have a clear milestone and clear framework. And the other key KPI is lengthening the longevity of the citizens so that people can enjoy healthy lives. And there are many methodologies that are being studied by these participating institutions. And there will be 6 pillars, and there are specific KPIs that are being developed right now. And we will be able to check the implementation level. So far, 20 projects have been initiated and proposed for each of these pillars. And I'd like to comment on some of the major projects. First of all, LH proposed Eco-Smart City Town creation. A city level would be too much of a scale, so as we are beginning this initiative, we can apply key new technology and green technology in a town so that we can test the idea. So that's the first proposal by LH, and from the transportation sector, this is crucial. We need to apply eco-friendly and low-carbon strategy and renewables. And high energy efficiency system has to be put in place, so there will be many initiatives. And for healthcare, which is crucial, we have to ensure that citizens can enjoy prevention and diagnosis and treatment and post-treatment care. We have to approach healthcare from the perspective of the users. And then, next, there is another aspect which is about monitoring. People talk about new technology and they talk about new value, but we have to make sure that we monitor the implementation and monitor their effect. So there will be the big data and other technologies so that we can monitor the implementation. It's going to be an information platform. So every now and then, we can have interim monitoring. We can check how much has been achieved, and then we will review and then revise our master plan so that we can go in the right direction. So that's the kind of system that we want to build. And with respect to safe city, in the past it was mainly about crime prevention, but now we need to include infectious disease control as well. And also we need to increase civil participation. Citizens have to be on board in the decision-making process so that they can be engaged. And we are going to utilize blockchain for democratic decision-making. So these are some of the proposals that have been made. And this is the roadmap. And finally, these are the four conditions that we need to meet in advance. For instance, we need a governance, we need KPI evaluation system, and we also need a management framework, and also we need an ecosystem to be created so that we can implement the Smart City initiative. So please refer to the slide for details. In the interest of time, I would have to wrap up my presentation, and then we will have the discussion session. Here, President Kang Hyun-soo of CRIS will moderate the panel discussion. There will be 4 designated discussants. Thank you very much.
이번 세션의 사회를 제가 보도록
Yes,
하겠습니다.
I will be
수영관님
presiding
반갑습니다.
over the panel discussion. I am Kim Hyun-soo, President of CRIS. I'd like to thank all the presenters. I am sorry that we could not give you enough time to fully flesh out your ideas.
저희 그 토론자들 먼저
I'd like to introduce to you the panelists.
국토교통부
We have from Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport,
오셨습니다.
Ms. Jung Jung-hee, who is in charge of Overseas City Cooperation Team. From Chungbuk University, Professor Ban Young-un. New Paradigm Future Institute Director Park Kwang-hee. And from Biocore, CEO Shin Yong-kyu.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
저희들이 사실은 시간이 좀 부족하긴 합니다만
We don't have enough time, but if you will allow for a late lunch, we can have 25 minutes to the discussion. We have now 23 minutes remaining. Let me propose this. I would like to give each panelist 5 minutes of talk, and then we can have the presenters respond to the comments and questions. I would like to ask Ms. Jung to go last, since you're from the Land Ministry. I would like to ask Mr. Ban to go first. Professor Ban, please.
네, 충북대학교의 반영훈입니다.
Hello, I am Han Young-un from Chungbuk University. First of all, it is my great pleasure to be part of the panel discussion. There were very important presentations in the session, so thank you very much for this opportunity.
글로벌 코리아라고
We're
하는
holding this Global Korea Convention 2020,
에코 스마트 시티
and this session is on Eco Smart City, and there were
대단히
presentations.
중요한 의미가 있다고
I
생각합니다.
believe that the session is very
오늘 그렇게 내용을
significant.
대단히 좀 들어보면
As I
저는 이런
listened
생각이
to the
듭니다.
presentations, this is what I thought.
저는 도시계획을 공부했고
I studied urban planning,
정책을
and I
계획을
also am involved in environmental policy planning. I am interested in sustainable development, and I've been doing research in this regard.
산업 전략,
When we look at the industrial policies and urban development policies and urban regeneration policies of Korea,
개념이 거의
the
없었습니다.
notion of ecology has not been included. Even though there is some inclusion, it was just
실제
the
구체적인 내용이
formality,
담겨 있지
but there
않았습니다.
was no substance.
그런데 이번에
But now
에코시티,
it is very
에코스마트
different
시티라고
because
하는
this initiative is called the Eco Smart City Initiative. As I was looking at this trend and this discussion,
시대가 오고 있는 거
I
아닌가
realized that now is really a new era.
VIP께서 말씀하셨던
As the VIP mentioned,
디지털 뉴딜하고 그린 뉴딜을
Digital New
합친
Deal and Green New Deal are combined as Korean New Deal, according to President Moon. And I believe that this is right time for us to pursue in this direction.
오늘 전반적으로 말씀을 들으면서
As I was listening to the presentations and the remarks, I would like to share some of my ideas.
에코시티에 대한 생각들을 그동안에 많이
I've been thinking about Eco Smart City, and I've been sharing my views. Digital New Deal and Green New Deal are well connected,
융복합적인
and there's a lot of convergence and integration between these two.
이제까지 우리가 잘해오고 있었던
So far, we've been doing well in AI, big data, and ICT. So there are these smart technologies, and Korea is well advanced in terms of smart technology.
제가 초기에 말씀드렸던
But
것처럼
as I mentioned in the beginning,
에코를 붙이게 되면
if we add eco or
우리의
ecological
국가
aspect,
그리고 지역 사회의
when we think about our culture and local community, whether we have achieved transition,
대단히 회의적으로 생각합니다.
I am quite skeptical about it.
이 부분을 두 개를 붙여서
But if we combine eco
다
and
잘할 수
smart,
있을까? 그런
can we really excel? Can we be successful? I do have some
그린 뉴딜
concerns.
사업의 안에 내용을
Within the
들여다보면
Green New Deal, when you look at the
상당 부분 에너지
details,
쪽에
many of them are related to energy.
어쩌면 이런 말씀은 조금
So I don't know if I can say this, but
생태 도시, 생태
when they
사회의
talk
전환을
about ecological
진정으로
city and
고민하고 있는
ecological
것인가에 대해서
society, I wonder if there has been enough
고민이 되고
consideration.
있습니다.
So this
제가
is my
생각하는 생태
concern,
도시는
because when I
순환,
imagine an
공생, 균형
ecological city,
등과
there's
같은
balance, there's
가치가
circulation,
먼저
there's
앞서야
harmony.
한다고
These
생각합니다.
values have to be
기술보다.
put in place before
그래서
any
이것이
technology is
우리의
applied.
그 각각의 공간에
So that in all of our
들어가서
spaces,
각 공간에
ecology will
경제적인
be
측면,
incorporated in
사회적인
our
측면,
economy,
환경적인
society, and
측면들이
environment.
전환되도록 해야
So
한다는
all
것이죠.
of these areas have to
그래서
go through
에코스마트 시티에서
transition.
기술을 통해서
So in
이러한
an eco-smart
가치가
city,
실현될 수 있도록
technology
하는
may be
그
utilized,
구체적인
but the key
부분이
has to be
담겨 있어야
promoting
된다고
values. So the value has to come first.
오늘 발표를 들으면서
As I was listening to the
에코스마트
presentations,
시티의 그 구체적인 내용들이
I
조금 더
examined some of the
다듬어졌으면
details about the
좋겠다는 생각을
eco-smart
하고요.
city, and I hope that they will be revised and
현재
improved.
발표되고 있는 6C free
6C free and 6S full was the notion for the eco-smart city. I like the idea.
우리가 정말 도전해야 될 과제들이 이렇게
These are
정리가 돼서
about
갔으면 좋겠다는
responding
그런
to
생각이 들고요.
the pending challenges, and I hope that we will continue to work hard to achieve this vision. But there are a couple of things that we need to cater to. First of all, when we think about industrial
우리가
parks,
생태적인 산업단지를 생각하지 않은 것 같습니다.
people don't seem to think about
수출할 때도
ecological industrial
외국에
parks.
나가서
When you
환경
make
오염이
exports,
심각한 산업단지를 만들어 놓고
you may create
그 국가에서
industrial parks in other
문제를
countries
다
that
해결하지
may
못하는
cause
상황까지
pollution,
가고
and
있죠.
these environmental
우리나라도
damages
제적
have
기반을
not
아직
been
놓지 못하고
properly
있습니다.
addressed.
몇 년 동안 우리가 이 정말 산업
That's
구조를
the
전환할 수
situation
있을지
in Korea as well.
고민이 됩니다.
We have not yet
고가가치
achieved
산업으로의
industrial
전환이 필요합니다.
transformation. We need
그렇지만
to
현재
move to
이
high
제적
value added
기반의
industries, but we
산업단지를
still
어떻게
have
생태적으로
the
전환할 것이냐.
manufacturing bases and industrial parks in Korea. How can we convert them? How can we utilize them so that they can become more ecologically,
산업단지의 이미지 이 모든 것들이
more eco-friendly?
생태 산업단지의 전환이 필요합니다.
We need to transform them into eco-friendly industrial parks. We talk about ecological cities and ecological towns, but we have not paid enough attention to converting industrial parks. But you may know that these parks pollute the air and they emit a lot of carbon. So if we can convert them into more eco-friendly industrial parks, we can gain a lot of benefits. And when we export industrial cities to other countries, then they have to be eco-friendly. Otherwise, we may make a mistake once again, and we may be criticized once again for polluting the environment. So while it's important to promote eco-smart city, we also have to export eco-friendly industrial cities. In the eco-smart city initiative, industry is not included, so I think that we have to add that. Thank you.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Professor Pan talked about eco-friendly industrial cities and emphasized the concept. I'd like to invite Director Park Kwang-gi of New Paradigm Future Institute for his comments. I agree with what Professor Pan just said. In going abroad, we need to be mindful of the ecological concerns in the overseas industrial development complexes. As was mentioned by the president of KETEP, China's One Belt, One Road initiative can be comparable to Korea's export of industrial complexes overseas. Korea lacks natural resources. And so the necessary resources have been imported, about 97% of them, and were processed into products and exported overseas, and we earn the dollars. We were an export country manufacturing products. That was the economic model that we had depended on. From the OECD's perspective, the productivity is the lowest, and Korean workers are suffering from the longest work hours. If we are to sell to the products overseas, is this making the Korean workers slaves? And we are importing the resources overseas. And we are producing the products, and the leftovers and the scraps are polluting the ecosystem in Korea. Of course, the export model is not wrong. We didn't have the natural resources and we had to survive. And so we produced the products and exported them, and the GDP per capita has increased to 32,000 US dollars. President Im talked about the mismatch of jobs numbering 2 million. Can we still have this export model? Will it be sustainable? Should we just let our workers remain as factory workers, slaving away for the longest hours? We need to rethink and reshape the business model. We have to convert to the knowledge-intensive industries. And so the industrial city export, I think, was proposed in that vein. When we were producing and exporting products, people have gone through a learning curve. Korea is a highly educated society, and we are naturally a knowledge-intensive society. So in any form, we can convert into a knowledge society. I think we are at a turning point. And the second issue I want to mention is Mr. Lee Yong-sam talked about the case in Myanmar. Myanmar considers access to clean water a smart city. And I think he made a valid point. We started with an industrial city based on manufacturing, and that's how our local cities grew. The traditional industrial cities have their own issues, and they have their own know-how of quality growth, and that has been distributed to the new towns. And so there are new towns generations 1, 2, and 3. And the new towns have emerged and evolved into Korean-style smart cities. And so there are some countries in the world which need the traditional industrial cities like the ones we used to have in Korea, and some are at the stage when they need stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 new towns. In order to solve urban issues, we are exporting the industrial cities. And so the smart city is not the key. We have to be able to solve the urban problems with the solutions. We are now evolving to generation 3 of new towns, and we have the upgraded versions of the solutions. Mr. Lee talked about how LH has 100 plus smart city solutions, and you can provide the smart city solutions as knowledge services to the other countries. We need to have balanced growth in Korea, and we need another leap forward for the traditional industrial cities. It's not to search for another new industry. We already have the traditional industrial city that has been in place for 30 or 40 years, and we need to take the learning from that, and we can export the industrial city overseas. And this will have been converted from a manufacturing-based industrial city to a knowledge-based industrial city. And so in closing, you talked about Mr. Lee, the KMIC in Myanmar project between Myanmar government and LH. Smart factory platform, sharing platform is in place, and data from 23 SMEs are collected. In establishing the industrial complex in Myanmar, you need to look at the Smart K Factory platform and look at the technologies in the database. And on top of that, you don't just stop at building industrial complexes. You may think about applying the smart city solutions and package them as knowledge services. And added to that, we have the chaebols in Korea, the large conglomerates. Up until now, these Korean companies have the network, personal, and trust and assets network, and this has been possible due to the hard work of the people. It's not the sole possession of the chaebol companies. The infrastructure has been built by the hard work of the people. And so even if it's just a trivial business type and sector, with the infrastructure and the connection and the network, they can become a very valuable asset to the overseas markets. So I hope we can look into this further. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Park.
Next, I'm going to invite Shin Yong-gyu, CEO of BioCoa.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Hello,
신영입니다.
I am Shin
사실
Yong-gyu.
저는 그 바이오코라는 헬스케어 기업의
I am CEO of a healthcare company called BioCore, but I am also a CEO of a private equity fund. So for many years, I've been involved in M&As of many domestic and overseas countries.
사실 오늘 와서 바이오하고
Now,
헬스케어 쪽 이야기
here in this session, I was going to talk about bio and healthcare because
오늘 그
that's why I represented myself as the CEO of BioCore. But
이명택 원장님께서 산업도시
President Im talked about smart city, and
수익 성장을 하기 위해서
in order to develop our economy, we have to expand overseas, and I agree to this proposition, and I'd like to share with you my own view. In 2016 and 17, there were similar projects that we carried out, so my experience can be quite helpful.
그 말씀하신 그 산업도시 관련돼서
When it comes to
전반적인
industrial
컨셉이나 아이디어
cities,
굉장히 공감하고
I like the
다만
idea
중요한
and the
것은
concept,
여하이 실행하느냐
but
집행하느냐인 것 같습니다.
it all boils down to the
작더라도
actual
큰
execution.
success가
There should
나와서
be
계속해서 추동력을
small but
가져가지고
core success
그런
cases
관점에서
so that we can
세 가지만
continue on
좀
with the momentum. And in that
하나는
sense, I'd like to make 3
하드웨어가
points.
아니라 소프트웨어
First of all,
중심으로
we have to approach from the software
왜냐하면
perspective.
우리나라가 갖고 있는 킬러 컨텐츠
We have killer contents in Korea.
헬스케어뿐만이 아니고
It could be healthcare,
아까도 말씀하셨지만
and
우리나라가 제수
as
3강이기
you
때문에
mentioned, we have manufacturing strength. So we have many killer contents for the manufacturing sector. So we have to be based on software. And then we need to understand the movement of capital and human resources. We've been exporting products, but now it is about exporting services. We have skilled workers and engineering know-how and expertise and many technological capabilities. So we have to approach this from the perspective of movement of people and capital. And we have to also be more softer and approach this from the commercial perspective. We need to achieve commercial goals by utilizing policies so that we can have very good expansion bases. As you may know, clusters and industrial complexes are different, so I think we have to go for cluster type development. You said that the Rust Belt could be a target, and there's a similar case. In 2016 and 17, along with many Korean steel producers, we went to Australia to take over a large steel company. There's a place called Waila that is near Sydney. This is world's #1 steel company. whether this is a locally tailored or engineering and consulting or job creation in the local community.
같은형이냐? 예, 그렇습니다.
It was very
국내
much
유수의
locally
제철 기업을
tailored.
갖고 있었던 파이넥스라는
There was Finex,
제철 기술 플랫폼을
which is a steel
이
manufacturing
경쟁력을
platform that
상실한
domestic
호주
companies
제철
have.
기업한테
And then
이식시키는
we were
거였습니다.
there to transport or transfer this technology in Australia because this Australian company was losing competitiveness and there were many layoffs. So together with the Australian government, they wanted to prevent the collapse of the local economy. So we designed the investment structure and technology transfer for that. And it was based on engineering and consulting. So it was export of services because the Fibex and also gas production from the steel companies in Korea could revitalize the steel industry in Australia. And it was about job creation as well. We did not succeed in this deal, but when you visit steel companies in Korea, there are many people in their 50s. They only have high school diploma, but when they look at the furnace, they can understand the quality of the furnace, the conditions of the furnace. But then after they retire, they may drive taxis or they may work as security guards. This is such a loss. So if we were to take over the steel company in Australia, then new technology would have to be applied. And these retired people in their 50s could have gone to Sydney and Waila, and they were going to work there. We were a preferred bidder, but it didn't go through because the competitor on the other side was a British company, and even the Queen was there to support this deal. But as for our case, we didn't get any support from the government, so we didn't win this deal. But there was something amazing after that. In Alsace-Lorraine area in France, and there was some Rust Belt in Germany, and we're talking about going into these areas. And in 2016 and 17, the U.S. Steel was losing competitiveness, and 50,000 people were laid off. And at that time, there were similar proposals from the U.S. Steel. And these examples show that we have killer content, and we can naturally, by utilizing commercial means, create industrial cities in other countries. And when you look at the Rust Belts, these are advanced economies, the Europe, the US, and Australia. So what I want to say is that creating industrial complexes in other countries is a good idea. At the end of 18th century, in the UK, unemployment rate was almost 40%, and there was almost 100% youth unemployment. As a result, there were all of these young people who were unemployed, and it caused social instability. But then overnight, they were able to reduce unemployment rate to zero. And how did that happen? In 1750s, in India, the UK won the battle, and they finally conquered India. And in India, the UK was able to build huge areas where a lot of British people were able to move to India to work there. And that was a big stimulus. Currently, the Korean economy is experiencing low growth and there's instability in our society. So I think we need some kind of vent out for our overseas expansion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shin Yong-gyu, you shared with us an interesting episode and you talked about the possible export of our human resources and technology. And lastly, I'd like to invite from the Ministry of Land and Infrastructure and Support, Ms. Chung Jong-hee. This is quite a meaningful session. In relation to the overseas projects, I have listened to the insights from the experts. I learned a lot. And in doing this work from the government, I felt that I need to work even harder. I think this was a calling. And listening to the presentations, there were some issues that you were not happy with, saying that there's a lack of control tower and the overseas projects are fragmented and disconnected and there are not KPIs in place. And in winning the project bids, there was not enough support coming from the government. Yes, you pointed them out, rightly so. They are the government's homework. We are doing what we can, but you still raise them as issues, so it shows us that we have still a lot to do. Smart city, overseas projects, and the strategies, I would like to outline them to you. Many of you may be familiar with that. In July 2018, we had the ministerial meeting, and there were ways to facilitate the smart city model export. This is composed of 4 pillars. One is to strengthen financial support. 2 is to build the smart city network. 3 is to have the companies of various sizes go together. And 4th is to form one team Korea and support the bidding process. And this is in line with what was mentioned before. And looking at the smart city budget, it was 70 billion won last year, and it doubled to 140 billion. And next year, we have not set the budget precisely, but it is in the size of 200 billion won. And so with more input, we believe that the output will get better and better. Looking at the definition of smart city by Korea, competitiveness and the quality of life will be enhanced. Construction, ICT, and new technologies will be converged and will be based on the urban facilities, and a sustainable city will provide eco-friendly services. And the infrastructure portion is emphasized in the definition of the Korean type smart cities. And looking at the benefits of the Korean style smart cities, there's a lot of know-how accumulated from the past industrial cities. And you talked about the industrial complexes, and they're in line with the local demands. And of course, there is a gap between what the other countries want and what we can provide from Korea's end, but the government will do all it can to create a win-win situation. And we have the K-City network launched in the beginning of the year. We had overseas competitions, and 80 people entered the competition from 20 plus countries. And so there was a high level of interest paid to the Smart City initiative. In carrying out this initiative, we are focusing on the public companies, and we want to help more SMEs come on board. And there should be more support, and the government should be more actively involved in the G2G initiatives. And that's how the government is supporting the Korean companies go overseas. I will take your recommendations to heart, and we will reflect them in devising the strategies for next year. And we will open our ears and hearts, and we will listen to your voices. Thank you very much.
예, 정 팀장님 감사합니다.
Thank you.
사실
Ms. Chung, Mullet is a very important ministry in this initiative. As was mentioned, ministry can play a role in building a control tower or a governance system. So I look forward to more active participation of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport. We are running out of time, unfortunately. I wish we had more time for further discussion. So finally, I'd like to turn to the speakers for their concluding remarks. First of all, President Im Chun-taek.
그 스마트 시티 수출에
Thank you.
산업도시도 유형으로 하나 넣어서
Smart city can be included as part of our plan to export industrial cities. The Green New Deal has Environment New Deal and Energy New Deal. So the Green New Deal is not just about energy, but there are environmental aspects including ecology and water. So we will have to continue to base our efforts on these important values, and we will reflect your comments in our work so that we can continue to put emphasis on these aspects. Thank you.
Mr. Lee Yong-sam
네,
from
감사합니다.
LH, thank you for the opportunity.
네 분 발표 너무 잘 들었습니다.
I would like to thank all the comments from the panelists. Eco-industrial sites and optimizing the government efforts and the advice about Myanmar. I think they were very helpful. Thank you very much.
이상건 박사님.
Next, Dr. Lee Sang-gun.
누구나 목표는 야심차게 세울 수
We all can set up ambitious plans, but when it comes to implementing these plans and making up a roadmap, we need to check the progress on a regular basis. So at the CRIS, we are going to develop the KPIs so that we can check on the progress of our initiatives in utilizing the new technology. Thank you for your feedback.
감사합니다. 우리
Thank you very much. Despite the pandemic, I would like to thank all the discussants and speakers for your insight. We are creating the eco-smart cities. I hope that they will be solutions to urban issues and also solve the global environmental challenges. They are very good projects. I hope that they can be spread worldwide. I would like to ask for your support. Let us cooperate together. With that, I would like to end this session. Thank you very much.